Judy Chicago.
Thank you.
The art world has become a big business in the way that it wasn't when you were starting. So I'm curious to ask, like, what have you learned about big business and about how big business works and how it looks that you couldn't have foreseen back then?
Well, first of all, I've been asked a lot about, oh, well, aren't you upset that this recognition has been so delayed and blah, blah, blah. Actually, I'm not. You know why? Because I had 5 decades of working in my studio without ever thinking about the market. So you have to really understand how outside of that I've been, because I had my own vision of what art can be, should be. I believe art is an act of generosity, and that I feel really bad for young artists because, they get swallowed up, spit out like stocks on the stock exchange. But, you can stand up to that. You don't have to do it.
Your work is willing to imagine something that, I have a hard time with, which is, not just the death of the world, which is something the art does deal with, but your own death. I was really moved by, I think it's called a mortality relief. It's this bronze piece in the exhibit, and it looks almost like a death mask in advance, but you clearly are able to imagine your end. What do you think about when you think about it?
I wanted to be able to face the end of my life with grace and courage, because it really isn't good to have an adversarial relationship to aging. I started out exploring, I start with research, so I started looking at attitudes towards death going back in time. And of course discovered that, we are an aberration in terms of the way we shroud death, hide death, try to have battles with death. When they write about cancer, after a battle, give me a break. Nature's gonna win.
Hearing you talk now reminds me that, I have a relatively romantic idea of imagination, especially when I'm sitting with a wonderful artist who makes work that I admire. I guess I'm tempted to think of imagination as this very beautiful thing that could take you to very beautiful places. But you were also willing to imagine horror and grotesquerie. And I think that maybe people are uncomfortable doing that.
There are a lot of people who are concerned about what's happening in our world, and they need to be encouraged to look at it, to think about it. We are encouraging people to participate in this digital quilt that I created with Dementi, the Web3 company, and Naja, one of the founders of Pussy Riot. And so there are a series of questions that I believe we need to answer, like, if patriarchy were dismantled, would women and men be equal? Would men have permission to be gentle and vulnerable? Would women have permission to be strong? Would there be equal parenting? Would the earth be protected? I think there are questions that we need to come together and answer. We are so polarized now. But if we don't answer those questions, we're going to drive the world to destruction.
Judy, what you're describing when you talk about this work is the ability that an artist has to use her skills and to use her imagination to pose these difficult questions to people and make them think about it. But it's like, Judy, I'm no artist. I don't have these skills. Is there something that non-artists can take from you where, like you, they can use what they're good at to make other people think in new ways? But for most of us, we're not able to paint and draw the way you can.
Of course, what we're looking at now is the pushback and the effort to push back all the gains that started in the 70s. It will take millions of people putting down their phones and going in the streets. I don't understand why there were not millions of people in the street after the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. not protests, because just a protest doesn't work anymore. What is required is the same thing that propelled the social change movements of the 70s, which has to do with organization, all the things that aren't fun to do. You know, developing leadership, developing organizations that can take the protest and turn it into actual civil change. I want to tell you something. It's worth it to feel like you've made a contribution, to have the satisfaction of that. I don't care what the New York Times said over the course of my career.
I live right by the Brooklyn Museum, where the dinner party is the heart of this beautiful collection of feminist art. The center is named for a member of the family behind Purdue Pharma and OxyContin. Apart from just what everyone else says about philanthropy and money and naming, I'm just curious how you feel about that.
First of all, I'm going to answer you with a counter question. Elizabeth Sackler's establishment of the Center for Feminist Art has allowed dozens of unknown women and feminist artists to be exhibited. Does she get any points for that? Or does her name disqualify everything she has done? Patronage is complicated, and so is history. It's like when everybody wanted to just knock down the Confederates' statues and sort of erase our past. I'm like, what if we let Black people, African Americans, come and write their stories on the statues so that we would see multiple points of view simultaneously, the point of view of the oppressor, the point of view of the oppressed.
I want to end, Judy, with the future. I'm curious if you imagine, you know, what art will look like. We're living in this strange time of artificial intelligence. You know, I'm wondering if you imagine that AI will demand room for itself in the art world. I'm wondering if the opposite will happen and the infinite possibilities of computerized art will teach us to embrace craft and imperfection.
My answer is going to be really short.
Okay.
Many, many years ago, Bruce Nauman and I had a conversation about, we were in our 40s, about how art schools were getting rid of drawing. And we agreed that when you're a young artist full of bravado and energy, you can go a long way in your career. But when you get into your 40s and your ideas get more complex, if you can't draw, you come to a standstill. And I am somebody who believes in the hand. And I believe in the connection between the hand and the heart. And that's my answer.
Well, your hand and your heart and your imagination have changed other people's hearts and their imaginations. I'm really glad you've been here to talk to me about it. Really, really enjoyed it. Judy Chicago.
Thank you very much. You're very smart.
Watch the Businessweek show Thursday nights, 10:30 Eastern on Bloomberg Television or 8:30 on Bloomberg.com or the Bloomberg app on connected TVs.